Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Champions of Self podcast. My name is Ben Eden, your host, and today I'm excited to welcome Sathiya Sam, all the way from Canada. Hello there, Sathiya.
Hey, how's it going, Ben?
Great. Thanks for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, as I always do, will you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So, I am an addictions coach. I specifically work with Christian men and I help them overcome pornography addiction. And so, I end up doing quite a bit of coaching. I have like the heart of a teacher, so quite a bit of teaching, and then tons of speaking as well. I'm very passionate about the subject. And as you and I both know, anything in this sort of realm of emotional health and dealing with the inner self. That's a message that needs to be trumpeted in our day and age, especially when it comes to men and men's health. So that's a little bit about me and what I do. Yeah, that's probably a pretty decent summary to get it started.
Very good. So, we'll jump into your story here in a sec, but as far as the pornography issue goes, I think it's very awesome that you are doing what you're doing. Because the way I've learned to see pornography is it's it's let's say it's a voodoo topic to talk about, right? It's like, no, we shouldn't do it and we shouldn't even talk about it. And when that happens, then somebody who has struggled with or is struggling with then says, well, now what? I can't talk to anybody. And I'm already doing what people say I shouldn't. And it adds to the emotional pain. It's like,
Yep.
I'm a terrible person now, right?
Yeah, 100%.
I'm trying to see if I need to bring up anything else because I can be passionate about this subject. Oh, one more thing. Where I categorize or what I summarize and what I talk about is say, hey, if we have unresolved emotions and we often look to a behavior to make us feel better or to make us ignore that emotional pain. So what starts as watching TV, video games, or whatever can escalate into something like pornography. Why? And I'm sure you'll get into this, but just to give context for people, the brain sees the unresolved emotions as pain and it wants to resolve the pain. Something like pornography, unfortunately, tells the brain something that, hey, this is release, this is relief, it feels good. And the brain says, hey, I need more of it, I need more of it. We know consciously that, hey, pornography isn't serving me, but we think it is because it's a band-aid for those emotions. Anyway, let's hear from you. You're the expert here on the pornography subject. So tell us what's on your mind. How does it relate to unresolved emotions?
Yeah, well, I think you actually said it quite well, Ben. There's the whole gamut of what people will do to get their unmet needs dealt with. And whether that's healthy or unhealthy is completely up to the individual. So, probably the best way to say it is that porn is a solution. It's just a really bad one. And so, what I do is I teach men how to find better solutions for their unmet needs, their unresolved emotions, and their unprocessed pain. Um, and there's several different principles and tools that I teach. I really believe in keeping it simple. I think the more complicated it is, the less likely you are to live it out and to really have any sustainability. So that's a huge emphasis of mine. But I mean, for me, my own personal journey, I just found that you can do what everybody tells you to do. The common things in Christian circles are get an internet filter, go to an accountability partner program or whatever it is, and sometimes you can even mix those two together. I'm not actually against those. I think they're great starting points. I think they're incomplete solutions in of themselves. And so my whole emphasis is no. Let's get to the heart of the issue. Let's figure out why you're going to porn in the first place. And if we can really tackle what's going on underneath the surface, then the overarching behaviors are going to take care of themselves.
Absolutely. Now, I think we're going to talk directly to somebody who is struggling with pornography. That's our audience right now. And what I want to say is the behaviors that you and I are talking about are band-aids for a wound that first needs to be cleaned and resolved. Otherwise, we're going to spend the rest of our life investing in band-aids and saying, why the heck doesn't the band-aid work? So like you said, there's nothing against the filters and the talking to people and everything else, because yes, those can serve a purpose and can help. But until we resolve the underlying emotions that tells our brain we need this solution, then those band-aids are going to exist. So again, we got to get to the heart of it and say, what is it that I haven't dealt with? And once I do, guess what? I'm going to be great. I'm going to love myself and life's going to be great.
Yeah.
So let's go into that.
Yeah, well, I think I think that's the hardest thing, especially for guys. It's much easier to settle for a superficial solution. And so, and we've all done it before. I mean, it's not just guys. We've all done something that gets us super excited. It looks like we're solving the issue, we're moving the needle forward, and then 2 weeks later, 2 months later, whatever it is, we're back at square one again. And that's always the symptom that you've chosen medication instead of a cure. So I totally agree, and I mean the way I say it is all behavior is rooted in belief. So until you resolve what's going on underneath the surface, dealing with the faulty beliefs and everything attached to it, like we're talking about the unprocessed pain, unresolved emotions, and everything else, until you really deal with those things, you don't have any hope of any kind of longevity in changing your behavior.
Hmm. Let's see if I can get my own quote right. When we focus on behavior, now let's see, let me phrase it this way. Focusing on behavior brings judgment, but focusing on emotion brings understanding, empathy, and connection.
Mm.
So what you said reminded me of, hey, behavior can show us what the person is feeling. And if we can focus on what the feeling is, then the behavior won't be an issue anymore.
Yeah.
But here's what I remembered. Sathiya, we need to hear your story. Why is this so important to you? And why are you the right person to help people through their own um, turning towards pornography?
Yeah, well, I'm not just researched on the subject. I have a personal experience myself. So I am a fourth generation pastor. That means my dad, grandpa, and great grandpa were all pastors. So in some ways, I didn't stand a chance to really pursue anything else. It's pretty deep in my roots, and I grew up in a good Christian home. Ben, I had loving parents. They were always present. I don't have any recollection of them prioritizing work over us or anything like that. But I struggled with pornography. I got exposed to porn at the age of 11 in the computer lab of my Christian school, and it happened completely by accident. It was purely innocent, but anyone who's had a struggle with pornography knows that the first time is almost never the last time, and that was certainly the case for me. So that moment in the computer lab started, like I mentioned, 15 years of struggling. In high school, it got worse, but I didn't really have a lot of remorse about it. It was kind of the classic, one day I'll stop this and it'll be fine. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't really care. And a lot of my peers were engaging with it as well. And again, we're all part of a Christian school, but unfortunately, it was sort of normalized. By the time I got to university, that's when I can say I was consciously aware that it was actually meeting a need. So I would go to university. I was I'm very studious, very strong work ethic, and I'd come home after long days, and that was my relief. That was the thing I got to look forward to sort of take the edge off and kind of, I don't know, just give some sort of an outlet. Um, and that's when I realized this was actually a major problem. And so it all climaxed when I had a pretty serious relationship end. I realized I don't like my life the way it is. I hadn't even really fully committed it to God at the time. And that was the turning point for me, even from a faith standpoint, is I decided I do want to live my life for God. I made a bunch of lifestyle changes. I stopped drinking excessively. I cleaned up my language. But I could not shake pornography. It was just this thing that was there all along. And it was so much easier to change those other things, but it was obvious that porn was clearly meeting a much deeper need. And so I was about 21, 22 at the time, and that began a 4-year journey of just trying to figure out how to actually resolve this thing. And as I alluded to earlier, I tried a lot of superficial answers like accountability partners, internet filters, all that stuff. They weren't really that effective, and that's what ultimately forced me to dig a bit deeper and explore some better options. And so, that involved some counseling, something that I kind of call like inner healing, that sort of approach, kind of mixing the spiritual, but then also some psychological concepts, and really trying to resolve wounds from the past, how I viewed myself, and unprocessed pain and emotion. So those were the things that really actually pushed the needle forward and allowed me to be free long term. And I was 26 the last time I looked at pornography. It was February 2016. And, as we're interviewing, I guess it's September 2020. So it's been about 4.5 years.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah, so that's a bit of my journey.
Sweet. Thank you for sharing. And for those of you not on YouTube, Sathiya over here is smiling. There's a light coming from his eyes as he tells us how long it's been since he looked at pornography. So I can definitely tell that he's confident in himself, proud of himself, and that he knows that he has power over his choices. Those are three elements that I just mentioned that can come when we understand why we have been turning to these behaviors. And we can say, hold on here, I don't have to anymore because I understand why, and now I'm going to choose not to. Now, let me say one more thing, because we might think, it sounds so simple just to say I'm going to choose not to. But like Sathiya said, is, after a good day of working hard and, good work ethic, doing good things, then I get home and it's like, well, shoot, I looked again. Because for you, it was a release, right?
Yep.
That is important to understand. And again, putting it in the context of emotions. We went through all day having these unresolved emotions and not doing anything about them. We spent and I'm saying we, but this is Sathiya's story. He was busy all day long doing things. So he didn't have time to think about the emotions. But here's something about emotions. They will always stay until they're heard.
Yep.
So at night they say, hey, Sathiya, I'm still here. And then the brain says, great, let's go to pornography. So we don't have to think about those emotions.
Yep.
But what I want to hear from you, Sathiya, is a little bit more about two things. Why, or what have you discovered as to the reasons why you were turning to pornography?
Yeah.
And I want you to go into detail a little bit more on what it finally took to make a change. The reason I want you to go into this is because I feel like there's a listener who might be struggling, and they might be in or have been in the category of, well, it's no big deal. Or they're just simply like, this is part of me, but I have absolutely no idea what to do. And I think your story will help them.
Yeah, for sure. I think the two things that I experienced that really helped was ownership. That was the first thing, and the second thing was forgiveness. So I'll explain both of those. Ownership is the hardest part of this because it is really easy to blame the porn industry. For me personally, it was really easy to blame my friend who introduced me to porn when I was 11. It's so easy to point the finger and to basically deflect responsibility, and that was the hardest thing. Owning just the fact that I am making this choice. This is a conscious choice I'm making every single time I do it. That was not a comfortable thing to face because that was a deeper statement about who I am and the person that I was becoming by just succumbing to my desires and not really figuring out what was going on. So ownership was the hardest part. Like the way I say it is, a mistake made once is a mistake. A mistake made twice is a choice. And that reaching that place of just, okay, this is actually a conscious choice, really painful, but also really empowering. Because until you realize you're part of the problem, you cannot be part of the solution.
Mm.
So taking that ownership was a crucial step. It was the step that really got the ball rolling. And you don't reach that place when you just install an internet filter on your computer. You don't reach it when you have an accountability partner that you say, hey, can you pray for me? I'm feeling tempted, or I just messed up, pray for me, whatever. You don't reach that level of ownership until you really face the music. And really, you reach a place that you're willing to get some help. I don't know anybody who really gets free on their own. And if they do get free on their own, they probably weren't that bound in the first place. So I think ownership is a huge part of it. I can say for me, ownership was a huge part of it.
Let me interrupt real quick. As far as the
Yeah,
ownership goes, because when you say, hey, I realized that it was a choice, I think there are two connotations that can come to the mind. You might think, well, it's a choice. That means I'm choosing to do it. That means I am a bad person for having chosen this.
yeah,
But if we think of the more empowering side and we say, hold on, if it is a choice, that means I can decide, then that's great. So when Sathiya realizes that, hey, there's a pattern here. When I get home from a hard day of work or at school and I've been busy, I find out that, oh my goodness, I always turn to pornography. So that's a pattern. But
yeah,
as I realize that, I can say what leads to this behavior. And when that happens, I can make the decision. I don't have to turn to this anymore because I have that choice.
yes.
There you go.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really well said. And the second thing for me was forgiveness. So I'll isolate one specific example, Ben, because I think this will tie into your real like overarching message and also probably hit home with some of your listeners. One of the discoveries I made along the way is that I actually had some resentment towards my mom. And it's going to sound like a bit of a strong thing to say, but the actual truth is my mom's an amazing woman. It's not like she was rude to me or mean to me. She wasn't cold or anything else like that. But my mom's personality is a little bit more timid. She's a little bit more reserved, even in the way she would show affection. You know, she wasn't overly affectionate. And I can still remember, you know, I'm 25 years old. I'm talking to a counselor, and I all of a sudden realize I have lived most of my life feeling neglected by my mom. And I had never connected that dot before. Like, I never realized it was part of the puzzle. And all of a sudden, you know, when you have those moments where you have 1,000 thoughts at once and they all sort of click. And it was like that for me. It was like, well, no wonder I've had this gaping hole in my heart, feeling neglected, like feeling like I'm not getting the affection and the affirmation that I need from my maternal figure. And so I'm resorting to other female figures to get the need met. And so whether it's women in real life or pornography is the easiest method because it's so accessible today, I suddenly was able to just tie everything together. So that was a painful discovery. You know, that's not a fun thing to realize about your upbringing and about someone you care about deeply, but it was absolutely essential for me just to acknowledge it, to really digest the emotion, to process the pain of it, to label it. And like I said, I think for me the biggest thing was probably feeling neglected, and feeling maybe elements of rejection as well. Although I would say neglect was the main thing. And once I was able to sort of work through the emotions and then reach a place of forgiveness where it's like, okay, I acknowledge this dynamic existed, but mom, I release you. Like I'm holding nothing against you. You owe me nothing. That when I could reach a place where I'm not just saying it cerebrally with my head, but I actually mean it with my heart, that's when things really start to change. And we were talking about this before you hit record, but I could pretty much sync it with the day where I noticed a shift in the level of control that I felt over my desires. So as soon as I was able to reach that place of genuine forgiveness in my heart, something changed as well in my desires, the way I was seeing myself, and ultimately the decisions I was making. So so ownership and then forgiveness, I think those are the two big things for me, Ben.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And when you had this moment of, I forget how you phrased it, but anyway, you could link the two, right? It's
Yeah.
almost like you may have had the thought, I don't need you anymore as far as the pornography goes, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah, when people fall in this trap, they can feel powerless. And if they don't recognize the patterns, if they don't realize that it's coming from unresolved emotions, if they don't realize that they have a choice, then yeah, it's like, well, shoot, I don't know what else to do. And everybody hates the fact that I do it. They don't know that I'm doing it, but you know, in general, they talk about it, so I can't tell anybody, and all these feelings of shame. You see how this cycle goes, and it's such a
Yeah.
lonely thing, isolation and shame. But I love what you're talking about and giving some tools for the listener to say, do I relate? And can I try one of those solutions? Not another Band-Aid. It's something internal that if
Yeah.
I can clean what's wounded, you know, clean out the wound, then guess what? Once the wound is healed, I don't need a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
And I also liked what you said about your mom. That, I imagine, was a hard thing to admit to yourself.
Yeah.
It could probably be scary to say, hold on here, I resent my mom. I don't think I should feel that way, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
But by you being honest and facing that emotion, that allowed you to overcome, and what you said is release that emotion. Once you did, my goodness, pornography is not a temptation anymore.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I like that. Let's see. So again, for one of the listeners, whoever's resonating with this, what Sathiya said about doing this alone, it's so hard to do alone. Okay, if it could be done alone, you know, we wouldn't be in these situations. So reach out for help. Reach out to somebody who can help you realize and be honest with yourself. It's okay that you haven't been able to do it alone. It's okay, right? It's okay that you have those emotions. It's okay that those emotions have been unresolved until this moment. But you now have a choice, and you have the ability to do something about it. So Sathiya, tell us a little bit about the groups and what people discover as they go through the healing process? And I'm going to kind of give the answer just because I want to make sure everybody gets this, and then we'll hear what you say.
Yeah.
People go from feelings of shame and isolation, I'm the only one who deals with this, to something that you mentioned prior to us recording. When you're in a group and you realize that, hold on here, somebody else also looks at pornography, and I know that they're an amazing person, and I don't judge them for that behavior, maybe I can think that way about myself. Maybe I can know that I'm a good person, and I don't have to judge me for my behavior. Go into some of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, porn is a huge isolator. And the irony is what draws a lot of men to pornography in the first place is feeling lonely, feeling like there's nobody out there, they lack meaningful connection, and then they just sink into this hole of deeper isolation. So the guys I work with, they automatically get put into a community, a pretty large community of other men who have gone through the journey or are somewhere on their journey to freedom. And then they also get put in a group that meets regularly. We meet face to face over Zoom. There's no hiding behind the camera. And like you said, Ben, it's guys from different walks of life. Some of them are husbands, fathers, some of them are single, trying to get their lives cleaned up before they reach that next stage of life. And guys from all over the world, from New Zealand, Europe, wherever. And the reason I say that is because it's actually quite liberating to realize, like, here are other men, they maybe even speak a different language, but they grew up in a different culture. They have the same problem I do. There's something about just having that common ground that really dissolves that isolation and that tendency to be lonely and to really just segregate from everyone else. So that's one of the main things DeepClean offers. DeepClean is the name of my program. And I mean, I experimented with a bunch of stuff when I was starting this. I did one-on-one coaching, I did group coaching. And group coaching was so much more effective for the reasons that we're mentioning. And I also think guys are always inherently a little bit competitive. So you get a bunch of guys in a group and they're all going to push each other to be their best. And I think that's an amazing thing as well. And then the other thing I do is I've built an online course as well. So I sort of integrate the three components, the wider community, the groups, and the online course. It's all into one comprehensive package. And the course is where they learn the kind of principles and concepts that you and I are discussing today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If a listener is thinking, okay, I know I struggle with pornography, I'd love some help because I haven't been able to do it alone. How do I overcome the, let's say, embarrassment of reaching out, first of all, but then you're telling me I have to be in a group and other people are going to know that I go through this? How do you help people get through those emotional barriers?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first thing to acknowledge is, yeah, it's an uncomfortable thing, and I realize what I'm asking is it's not something everyone's just going to leap and jump for. Um, I think I have tried to whittle down my process to the essentials. Like I said, I like to keep things simple. I don't want to complicate and convolute this thing. And I just don't see another way for guys to be free long term without having the group component. So I think I would just say, yeah, I'm not trying to pretend this is like just a super fun thing, but I will say once you actually jump the initial hurdle, it gets pretty easy. Guys open up pretty quickly. We actually had a guy, it was about 3 weeks ago. He didn't just struggle with pornography. He had really, like, if somebody dabbles in pornography enough and they get more curious or they build up a tolerance and they start to explore more things, it can really, it can go down a pretty dark place. And he had darker things he hadn't really shared. Talking about pornography was pretty light for him compared to the other things he did. And it took him about 2 months before he finally was like, you know what, guys, there's actually something I've been wanting to share. I haven't felt super comfortable doing this, but I feel like I'm ready to now and I have to do it. And he shared, really candidly about the stuff he went through. And it was amazing because someone on my team was actually running that group. I wasn't running it myself. But I listened back to the call because he told me about what happened. And basically all the other guys in the group, there was a couple of them who said, oh, bro, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I've actually struggled with that too. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't think anybody else here struggled with it. And they're all just supporting, and the other guys who hadn't struggled, they just said, hey man, we love you. We're here for you. We don't think of you any differently. So I think that's the beauty of doing this with other guys who get it, is there's no judgment and there's oodles of support and unconditional acceptance. So I think that's the best selling job I can do on the groups, and why it's it's worth it to have some sort of community around you who's on the same journey as you.
Good. Thank you for sharing that. One more thing that I would like you to share with us. What can you tell the listeners about how they will feel about themselves after realizing what people in your group realize? I hope that's clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the way I say it, Ben, is that pain is a preserver. And so, pain preserves lies, it preserves false perceptions, anything that happens from, moments or ongoing situations in life, everything is preserved by, yeah, pain and ultimately unresolved emotion. So when you start to really dig in and you really start to process some of those things and give them a release and find healthy outlets and build good processes for dealing with your emotions and all of that, you begin to discover your true self. The lies start to uproot, the false perceptions of yourself, the world, others, whatever it might be. You start to just get clarity and think, wait a minute, this isn't true at all. I can't even believe I've been seeing things this way. And you now get an opportunity to actually just detach from them, analyze them, and then get an experience with the truth. And really, it's the truth that sets you free. We know this, and the ultimate pursuit in all of this is freedom. It's freedom to be our true selves. It's freedom to not be inhibited by whatever it might be. And the only way you experience that is when you encounter the truth. So that's what somebody who goes through this journey can expect, is in the process of working through unresolved areas of your life and really digging underneath the surface, is you discover the deep, meaty parts of yourself, and you get to align them with godly truth and really start to see yourself the way that God sees you. And once those things actually take place at a heart level, then I mean, geez, the rest of it just takes care of itself. Those other behavioral aspects are much easier.
Boom. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so important what you said, is that as you come to be honest with those things and come to know your true self, then you are okay with that. You come out empowered. We're often afraid of it because I don't want to face the truth. Because I don't want to see the dark and the ugly. But once we do, that part is released and we learn to love ourselves for who we are, because we are lovable. We are good enough. All sorts of great things. Thank you for sharing. How can people connect with you on social media if they'd like to learn more?
Yeah, so I'm Sathiya Sam. It's a bit of a tricky name to spell. That's Sathiya. That's Instagram and Facebook. The name of my program is DeepClean. So if someone's interested in connecting that way, I do offer free strategy sessions just to see what people's situations are like and how I can help. And if I can't help, maybe somebody else who can. So you can go to getadeepclean.com, and that'll give you more information about what I do and how you can get connected that way.
Very good. Well, thank you for joining. And everybody, thank you for listening to this episode of the Champions of Self podcast. I hope it has been helpful for you, and we'll talk to you next time.